And so the sun rises on another day. The last day of a week in which we've seen anger and strife, misunderstandings and violence continue in the world around us. It's a new day, the last and most important of days, as it is the one that God asked to be set aside for Him. And what a plan in the chaos around us, to take a day away from it all and contemplate our place in His creation. It's a new day. But for the moment, what a sunrise, eh? And a new day. It's good to be back with you, friends. And yes, I did in fact wake up at 4:45 this morning to get down to the shores of Lake Erie to share this sunrise with you. I had this great idea to record while here, and it all sort of fell through without my producer, as I wasn't able to get a hold of the wind and the waves crashing and the rest. And so I thought what I'll do is just sort of enjoy the sunrise with you and put the story in as a voiceover. I hope that works for you, okay? I have to admit, these weeks have been tough. It's so hard to see people, friends, families even, attacking each other. Everyone trying to be heard over each other, each point being swallowed up in the spin and pull of others' agendas, and not many, if any, actually listening or trying to understand one another. Just everyone trying to be right. But it's a new day today, and this day is full of opportunity. I want to take you back in history and share with you a story that I think rings, or should ring true, into today's current circumstances. I want to take you all the way back to the mid-800s BC, 850 about, somewhere around there. After the split of the tribes, north and south, the north, Israel, had come under the rule of its sixth king, King Omri. After a half dozen years of ruling from the capital in Tisra, Omri purchased the hill now known as Samaria from a man named Shemer for 150 pounds of silver. On it, he built a city, and he named it Samaria in honor of Shemer, which stood as his capital, holding good defensive ground over the valley and main road between Jerusalem and Galilee. After about 6 more years, Omri died, and his son became king of Israel, ushering in the rule of the infamous Ahab, who many of you know. After some time in 722 BC, Samaria fell to the Assyrians, and the city became the regional Assyrian capital known as Samarina. With the fall, most of the Israelites of Samaria, of course, were taken into custody, with some farmers and other rabble remaining in the land, not being worth the time it took to track them down. This rabble left behind intermarried with the people of Mesopotamia and Syria, and they became known as Samaritans. That should sound familiar to you. The Jews left in Jerusalem hated the Samaritans. They considered them less than dogs and outcasts. Though the Jews themselves had also intermarried for some time, these tribes have been at war ever since probably before the split of the North and the South. In his encyclopedic dictionary of the Bible, Lewis Hartman points out that despite the Jerusalem Jews' hatred for the Samaritan Jews, the Samaritans likely had every bit as much pure Jewish blood as the Babylonian Jews returning from exile in some time, if not more so. When Cyrus began the return of the Babylonian exiles, the Samaritans welcomed them back into the region with open arms, which the Babylonian Jews flatly rejected, again considering the Samaritans less than dogs. And again, when the Samaritans tried to help rebuild the walls around Jerusalem and the temple, their offers were rejected with prejudice and hatred. These stories can be found in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah as the story of the closing of the chronology of Israel in the Old Testament was told. This rejection caused the Samaritans to turn to some politics for revenge. They stirred up trouble with the people in the region. They gathered them together and wrote a letter telling the Persians that owned Jerusalem at this point that the Jews were rabble-rousers and couldn't be trusted. They told them they would not be honorable in their dealings with Persia, and that they would likely just maim or kill the tax collectors for Persia, that they would rebel, that they would constantly be a source of pain and embarrassment for Persia in the Jerusalem and Mesopotamian region. It was into this atmosphere that we see Nehemiah and Ezra coming, and they really believed that the reason the Jews lost control of Israel and Jerusalem, the promised land, was because they hadn't followed the laws strictly enough. They apparently weren't paying attention to Jeremiah when he said the problem was not breaking the law. The problem was that you broke the law but said you didn't. They believed that the only way to retain or really regain full control of the region of their promised land was by strict and severe adherence to the laws outlined in Exodus and Leviticus. I suppose there are still some like that today. Nehemiah really focused heavily on the intermarriage of Israelites and foreigners among them, believing that this was the source of their problem. And again, probably taking, or rather putting, blame for their loss on others instead of on themselves. Nehemiah was severe in his punishment of Jews that intermarried with people that were not considered pure. At the end of his book in chapter 13, Nehemiah says that he beat the men severely, pulling out the hair of their beards and their heads, as he forced them to either reject their wives and offspring from these marriages as if they had never been part of them. Imagine the chaos that created. Or be expelled from Israel and Jerusalem. Among the intermarried people was a high priest's son named Eliashib, who had married the daughter of a Samaritan ruler whose name was Sanballat. Now Sanballat and his daughter were worshipers. They were followers of the one true God, Yahweh. But this didn't matter to Nehemiah. It didn't even matter that they were Samaritans themselves, at least half Jewish, if not more. Eliashib, not being willing to give up his wife, was driven out of Jerusalem by Nehemiah. Sanballat didn't take this well. He was, as I said, a ruler in Samaria and a worshiper of God, recognizing that the Jews were never going to let the Samaritans worship in Jerusalem. Sanballat builds a temple in Samaria on Mount Gerizim, and he puts Eliashib there to function as a priest. According to the historian Josephus, this was a real breaking point, like the ultimate last straw that broke the camel's back between the two already at war cousins. During the Maccabean Wars around 108 BC, the Samaritans allied with the Seleucids, and the Jews invaded and tore down the Sanballat temple in Samaria. Then sometime later, around 100 some odd years, around the time of Christ's birth, the Samaritans returned the favor, raiding Jerusalem and desecrating their temple by scattering the bones of the dead throughout the holy place. You can see throughout the course of their history, anger meets anger, revenge meets revenge, power over one meets power over the other, and all we're really getting out of this is strife and division among the people. Humans, created by God in His image, that simply can't get along together. Humans, created by God and in His image, of the same family, unable to recognize their similarities in what they saw as the glaring oppression of their differences. Well, all this background should be a setting for you to understand how deep the rift of hatred was between these two, sufficiently enough to draw a gasp from you at the story of, say, the Good Samaritan told in Luke 10. Can you understand now the force of Christ's story, pointing out that the person wounded on the side of the road, being a Jew, was not cared for by his own people? In the story, Christ points out that the Pharisees crossed to the other side of the road, not wanting to make themselves ritually unclean by perhaps touching a dead body or someone that's bleeding. Their sanctity, their purity was more important to them than caring for another. In the story, Christ highlights the point that even a dirty, scummy Samaritan, according to the Jews, has such a heart to stop and help when they wouldn't help one of their own. Even a Samaritan, recognizing that the man lying there in the ditch would outwardly reject him had he been healthy enough to do so, was compelled to care for this man, even to give his own money to take care of him after he had gone. You, as they were, should be struck by this, particularly given the light of the world we find ourselves in today, where anger seems to rule the day. This is also the setting that brings us to John 4 and the woman at the well, and I'm not going to read the whole story because I really wanted this to be short and thoughtful this morning. But I do want to point out that Christ is on his own, leaning against the well. He's tired, and the woman comes, and when he speaks to her, she can't figure out why he would do this. He's a Jew and she's a Samaritan. I want you to understand that the anger has gone so far that she also has some ill regard towards him, understanding that they're different. And I want to show you this in verse 19. After he's told her that he gives the living water and she's asked him for it, after he's told her to go get her husband and she points out that she doesn't have one, and he tells her, that's right, you told the truth, you had 5 husbands and currently you're living with a man who you're not married to, she comes back and says this in 19. Sir, the woman said, you must be a prophet, so tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim, right where Sanballat built that temple? They're still worshiping. Jesus' reply in 21, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who's called Christ. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. And then Jesus tells her, I am the Messiah. Now I do want to share this little piece more with you. Just then his disciples came back. They were shocked to find him talking to a woman, but none of them had the nerve to ask, what do you want with her? Or why are you talking to her? The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So the people came streaming from the village to see him. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging Jesus to eat something, but Jesus replied, I have a kind of food you know nothing about. Did someone bring him food while we were gone? The disciples asked each other. And then Jesus explained, my nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me, and from finishing his work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest, but I say wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people, brought to eternal life. What joy awaits both the planter and the harvester alike. You know the saying, one plants and another harvests, and it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others had already done the work, and now you will get the harvest. They stay in that town for a few days, and many Samaritans come to follow as a result. Friends, simply today, I'm asking you, in this new day, to pick up this new challenge. The world is so divided around us. Every side thinks they're right. Let's rise above that and be children of God. For the time is here where it doesn't matter whether you worship in the mountain or you worship in the city. The time is coming here where it doesn't matter whether you're this side or that side. God is seeking people who live in love, in spirit. He has called us to a greater calling than this world can even understand. The last piece I was going to go to, and I'm not going to read it, it's from John also, I think 14, at the beginning of the upper room when the guys are worried about Christ leaving, and he says, I'm going to give you this peace. And in the New Living Translation, you've all read this, I've read this to you times before. He says, I'm giving you my peace. It's my peace. I don't give it as the world gives, as the traditional reading. In the New Living Translation, it says, the world cannot give it because it does not have it. Christ's peace be with you. May Christ's peace be with you in a way that gives you the ability to stand between people that think they hate each other for a history that goes back years and years and years. It's my prayer that you would have Christ's peace, that you could share it with these people in a way that they understand that the opportunity is forward, hand in hand with Christ, hand in hand with like believers. Friends, in spirit, I leave you today on this new, good, and glorious day. I love you. Take care, and we'll see you soon.